Hello everyone! Not long ago, the entire city of Hiroshima in Japan was shaken by news that a Vietnamese woman had been brutally murdered inside her own apartment. What raised suspicion was that less than half a year earlier, she had also been attacked for no apparent reason by a stranger. The perpetrator has now been arrested. But are these two incidents, separated by only a few months, connected? And was the same person behind both attacks? What motive could have driven the assailant to specifically target the victim? A gentle Vietnamese woman who had never had a conflict with anyone. Stay with Vietnamese case files until the very end of this video as we work through these difficult questions in a case that shocked both Vietnam and Japan. We would also like to note that all content in today's video has been researched and compiled by our team from multiple sources. If there are any errors or details that need correction, please leave a comment below so we can update and revise accordingly. And before we get into the details, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now so you won't miss other gripping cases on Vietnamese case files. Thank you for being with us. On the evening of October 15th, 2025, a man, let's call him A, 34 years old, Vietnamese nationality, finished his shift and returned home as usual. He and his wife lived in an apartment on the 14th floor of a condominium building in Nishi Ward. But the moment he opened the door, the scene before him left him frozen. His wife, Nguyen Thuy Na, was sprawled on the living room floor, motionless in a large pool of blood. In sheer panic, A rushed over and shook her, calling out her name, but it was already too late. Her body was cold, yet blood from a head wound was still slowly seeping out. In shock, A ran straight to the nearest police station, the Hiroshima Nishi police station, to report what had happened. His broken, halting statement immediately put the officers on high alert. Although Hiroshima is considered a safe city, they understood this could be a serious homicide. Right after receiving the report, police units were deployed to the scene at once. The situation was exactly as A had described. In the middle of the living room lay the body of a Vietnamese woman, face up, with her head and hair matted with blood. Large bloodstains were scattered around, and a pool of blood had collected directly beneath her head, showing she had lost a great deal of blood. The room was clearly disturbed. Tables and chairs had been pushed out of place, and some items were knocked down and broken on the floor. Cabinets had been flung open, and blankets and pillows from the sofa were strewn across the ground. Everything formed a chaotic scene, suggesting a violent struggle had taken place. What caught investigators' attention in particular were bloody footprints on the floor, stretching all the way from the area around the body to the front door. This was a sign that the killer had likely stepped into the victim's pool of blood during the attack and then fled in a hurry. Those footprints became both a vital clue and a chilling image of the murderer's coldness. Police also found that the security camera outside the apartment door had been smashed. That indicated a strong level of counter-surveillance, an effort to conceal the perpetrator's appearance. It also helped explain how a stranger could enter the building so easily. But for police, it raised another fear. If the attack was random and driven by robbery, the perpetrator could strike anyone in what had been a very safe residential area. The discovery left everyone in the neighborhood horrified and deeply unsettled. Shortly afterward, Japanese police sealed off the entrances to the building and began a detailed investigation. After a quick examination of the body, medical personnel confirmed that the victim had died before she was discovered. There was a very deep wound on her head, several centimeters long, resembling a cut or a chop made by a sharp object. In addition, when investigators gently turned the body over, they saw more bruising on the victim's arms and shoulders. The marks looked like the result of a tight grip or a heavy impact, possibly from the victim struggling to defend herself before the assailant used force to restrain her. Examining the victim's hands, police also noticed small fragments of skin and hair caught under her fingernails, suspected to belong to the perpetrator, collected as she fought back. No obvious weapon was found at the scene, suggesting the killer either took the weapon when fleeing or used an item available inside the home and then removed it as well. On the floor, near the body, police recovered the victim's mobile phone beneath a table. Its screen was completely shattered, indicating it may have been stepped on during the struggle. One of the victim's slippers had been flung into the corner of the room, while the other remained near the entrance, suggesting the attack happened so suddenly that she did not even have time to put her slippers on properly. These traces left investigators with a lasting impression that this was an extremely violent crime. The victim was attacked without warning inside her own home, then suffered fatal blows to the head, The chaotic scene also showed that she fought back fiercely, but the attacker's brutality led to the most tragic outcome. The presence of multiple bloody footprints leading toward the door further supported the theory that the perpetrator fled in a hurry after the attack, likely fearing discovery. And for that reason, the police's immediate mission was to follow those bloody footprints and identify the killer before it was too late. While the forensics team continued analyzing the scene, another team looked into the victim's background to see whether she had faced anything unusual or had any recent conflicts, in hopes of finding a lead. From the husband, identified as A, police learned that the victim's full name was Nguyen Thuy Nga, a Vietnamese woman in her 30s. Neg had been in Japan for several years. Her husband, A, was also Vietnamese and was currently working at a mechanical workshop in the city. Neg worked part-time. The couple had an 8-year-old child, whom they had left with grandparents back in their hometown before moving abroad. In daily life, both Nay and her husband, A, were described by neighbors as gentle, friendly Vietnamese residents with no bad reputation in their adopted country. NGA's friends also said she was easygoing and had never had any disputes or conflicts with anyone. However, amid all that calm information, a troubling crack began to appear. Soon after the murder, a Facebook account named Dung, claiming to be an acquaintance of Na, posted messages that revealed a shocking piece of information. Not long before the tragedy, the victim had accidentally discovered that her husband was having an affair. The other woman was also Vietnamese. She had been in Japan for some time and was allegedly trying to cling to Inga's husband in order to stay in the country because her visa was nearing its expiration. And she did not stop at seducing a married man. She was even willing to confront Nga directly and pressure her to leave her husband. This left Nga both furious and shaken. In messages confiding in relatives, Nga expressed deep sorrow over the cruel, painful situation her family was facing. Most recently, she confided in a friend from her hometown that she felt very uneasy and had to stay on guard whenever she went out alone. Friends advised her to move, but Nga and her husband were planning to return to Vietnam after their work contract ended, so they hesitated to make any changes. No one could have imagined that hesitation would lead to such a heartbreaking outcome. Her tragedy moved everyone. A Vietnamese woman who had gone abroad to make a living, only to lose her life in a foreign land at the hands of a brutal killer. As for the police, they also quickly uncovered a suspicious detail. In late May 2025, Nga had been attacked by an unknown woman near her home and was injured. At the time, Hiroshima police handled the incident as an assault, causing intentional injury. According to Nga's statement to police then, the attacker was a strange woman who appeared to be Asian as well. However, because the assault came without warning, Nga could not clearly identify the woman's face, and the attacker fled quickly once passersby appeared. Although the injuries from that incident were not severe, being attacked for no reason left her living with constant fear. Police investigated at the time but could not find the perpetrator or any clear motive. Nga gradually recovered and her life returned to its usual routine, until the tragedy on October 15th. Now that NJ had died, police immediately considered the possibility of a connection between the May assault and the October killing. Just 2 days after taking the case, Hiroshima police established a special task force, gathering around 70 elite investigators to devote their full efforts to solving it. Wakabayashi Eiji, head of the Criminal Affairs Division at the Hiroshima Prefectural Police, personally directed the investigation, showing both the seriousness of the case and the authorities' determination to solve it quickly. Their immediate goal was to identify and narrow down suspects as soon as possible, before the killer had the chance to disappear or strike again. Investigators began by meticulously analyzing the apartment scene where crucial clues might still be preserved. Each blood-stained footprint on the floor was measured and mapped to determine its direction of travel. Based on the shoe size and stride pattern, they formed an initial profile of the perpetrator, an adult woman of relatively light weight, since the prints were not deeply impressed, moving with hurried and erratic steps, possibly from rushing or panicking after the attack. Because the blood trail extended from the front entrance all the way to the kitchen area, police believe the victim was attacked near the main door and then either tried to run or was dragged toward the kitchen. Moreover, blood appearing right from the doorway suggested the assault began as the victim had just opened the door or as the perpetrator had just stepped inside. This became a key point indicating that the victim unexpectedly came face to face with the attacker right as she opened the apartment door, meaning the perpetrator may have been waiting outside, rather than secretly breaking in. This theory also fit the fact that the building did not have a locked entrance on the ground floor, allowing a stranger to reach the 14th floor and lie in wait outside the victim's apartment. In addition, the extreme mess at the scene was examined closely. The disorderly rummaging suggested the attacker had been searching for something, possibly cash or valuables. Police therefore worked with the husband to check what items were missing. But, according to the husband, the couple lived simply and did not keep much cash at home, making the search for valuables seem puzzling. The traces left behind also pointed to the attacker's haste, perhaps under time pressure to leave quickly for fear of being discovered, or panicking after committing the crime. In parallel with the work at the scene, police questioned witnesses. Several nearby residents provided valuable information. Early that morning, they had heard a piercing scream coming from the apartment, but no one directly witnessed the confrontation. An elderly man living on the floor below recalled that around midday he heard a loud thud from the ceiling, meaning from the victim's apartment, but he assumed something had fallen and did not pay much attention. Meanwhile, the autopsy quickly produced conclusions. Forensic examiners confirmed that the victim died from acute hemorrhagic shock and severe brain trauma. She had at least 5 to 6 serious head wounds caused by repeated blows from a hard object. This showed the attacker used an extremely high level of violence, with the clear intent to take the victim's life rather than merely restrain her. The victim also had subcutaneous bruising on her arms and some other areas, consistent with her raising her arms to block blows or struggling before she collapsed. The time of death was estimated to be around midday on October 15th, many hours before she was found, indicating that the tragedy occurred shortly after her husband left for work. The timing was extraordinarily brazen, in broad daylight in a crowded residential area, suggesting the perpetrator was either extremely reckless or had carefully calculated the moment, knowing the victim was home alone. Another major investigative focus was the network of security cameras in the area. Although the building had no cameras in the hallway on each floor, the condominium's entrances, elevators, and nearby streets were covered by cameras installed by management and surrounding shops. On the night of October 15th and the morning of October 16th, technicians extracted hours of footage from every camera with a view of the building, tracking the victim's movements and searching for suspects. They soon saw that on the morning of October 15th, the victim had left home at least once. That meant she was still alive before noon. It also meant the scream neighbors heard early that morning did not come from this incident, so it was highly likely that Nga was killed around midday or in the afternoon. Police then carefully reviewed each video segment to see whether any suspicious person appeared during the window from after 8 to 9 a.m. until 6:30 p.m., when the victim's husband returned home. Sure enough, from the camera at the condominium's entrance, police spotted an unfamiliar figure appearing around midday on October 15th. It was a woman wearing a dark jacket, a face mask, and a baseball cap pulled low, with an average build. She entered the building in a rather hurried manner and tried to avoid looking directly at the camera. Nearly an hour later, the same woman left the condominium carrying a small handbag. Although the footage was not very clear, it was enough to make out that she was an East Asian woman with long black hair tied back neatly. Based on the data collected, police gradually sketched out a profile of the suspect, most likely a Vietnamese woman living in Hiroshima or a nearby area, close enough to observe the victim's routine, estimated to be around 25 to 35 years old, judging from the figure seen in the video. In particular, if the person on the camera footage was indeed the perpetrator, she may have gotten blood on herself when leaving the scene, since there were many bloody footprints inside the apartment. For that reason, investigators quietly checked local hospitals and clinics to see whether anyone came in for wound treatment or showed suspicious signs on October 15th and October 16th. However, nothing noteworthy was reported. Possibly the killer treated any injuries herself or did not sustain any serious injuries. Eventually, Hiroshima Prefectural Police decided to release several still images extracted from CCTV and circulate them through trusted channels, including immigration authorities and the local Vietnamese community, to assist with identification. The images sent out together with information about the case immediately stirred the Vietnamese community in Hiroshima. Did anyone recognize this familiar-looking figure? Not long after, one name quickly rose to the surface and matched the identifying features closely: Dinh Thi Huong, 32 years old, a Vietnamese technical intern currently living and working in the Suginamidai area of Saiki Ward, not far from the crime scene. She had come to Japan under the technical intern program and had been in Hiroshima for some time. Some sources also mention the nickname Huong Cherry, which Din Thi Huong used on social media. Notably, when investigators looked at Huong's passport photo, they were startled by how closely her face resembled the woman captured on camera. Taken together, these details made her the #1 suspect in the task force's eyes. However, identifying a suspect was only the first step. Police needed solid evidence before making an arrest. They placed Din Thi Tung under covert surveillance and then carried out an urgent search warrant at her residence in the early morning of October 25, 2025. In Huong's rented room in Saiki Ward, police found several suspicious items. A pair of shoes whose sole size and tread pattern matched the footprints left at the scene, with brownish stains consistent with dried blood, a dark-colored jacket, and a baseball cap resembling those seen in the video. A rapid test of the blood sample on Huong's shoes matched the victim's blood type. This provided sufficient grounds to conclude that Din Thi Huong was the person who entered Nguyen Thuy apartment on October 15th with the intent to kill. An arrest operation was immediately launched. Din Thi Huong, 32 years old, a Vietnamese technical intern, was formally arrested on suspicion of unlawful entry, robbery, and murdering a fellow Vietnamese national. Japanese media described the scene as she was escorted away in a gray outfit, her hands cuffed. Her face showed a flicker of fear when confronted by a storm of camera flashes, but Huong remained silent and did not say a word. It marked the end of the killer's flight after a cold-blooded chain of actions on foreign soil. At the police headquarters, Huong appeared shocked at first, then stayed silent. Authorities said they could not yet disclose her statement out of concern it might affect the ongoing investigation. That meant Huong neither confessed nor denied. She chose silence in the face of the accusations. However, with the evidence collected, from CCTV images to scene traces and the items recovered, Hiroshima police stated they had sufficient grounds to identify Huong as the perpetrator. Police also said they were closely investigating the possibility of Huong's involvement in the victim's assault back in May in order to clarify the motive. And so, a case that had seemed stuck for 10 straight days finally saw a breakthrough. The suspect's identity shocked not only the Japanese public but also the Vietnamese community. Because the perpetrator was not a stranger at all, she was a 32-year-old Vietnamese woman, a fellow countrywoman of the victim. The irony was that she too had come to Japan as a technical intern, like so many other young people chasing a livelihood abroad. This truth raised many questions. Why would Din Thi Huong brutally kill a fellow Vietnamese national? Did they have a relationship or some personal grudge? Or did Huong become a cold-blooded killer for money? These were questions the police would continue working to answer in the days ahead. And although the case file is not yet complete, based on the evidence collected so far, we can form a fairly concrete picture of how events likely unfolded. On the morning of October 15th, Huong had been watching the victim and knew that Nga's husband had gone to work, so she slipped into the apartment on the 14th floor. When she arrived, she calmly rang the doorbell. Perhaps Nga thought it was simply a visitor and opened the door without hesitation. But the moment the door swung open, Huong moved in. She immediately launched a fierce attack on Nga from the entrance all the way to the kitchen area. Nga died on the spot from a fractured skull, and her blood spread throughout the apartment. Confronted with Nga's body, Huong did not hesitate. She continued rummaging through the home, hoping to find some cash or gold. But in the end, she did not find much, and she fled in haste. Before leaving, she still had time to smash the camera to conceal her movements. Back at home, Huong believed that with careful disguise, police would have difficulty tracing her. But justice has a way of closing in. Japanese police identified Huong just over 10 days after the crime. As mentioned, many questions remain unanswered about motive, the method of the attack, and the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim. So Japanese police are still investigating. For that reason, the trial process has not officially begun. However, given that Huong has been detained and indicted on charges of unlawful entry, robbery, and murdering a fellow Vietnamese national, a bleak future likely awaits her. Under Japanese law, homicide carries an extremely severe penalty, up to life imprisonment or even the death penalty in especially serious cases. If combined with robbery, the circumstances become even more aggravating. Moreover, Huong's brutal act and the local public outrage it caused could give prosecutors additional grounds to pursue the maximum charge. Even so, looking at precedent in similar Japanese cases, legal observers predict that Din Thi Huong will most likely face either life imprisonment or a sentence of several decades, because Japanese courts typically impose the death penalty only when there are multiple victims or when the method is exceptionally brutal. In this case, while the perpetrator's actions are unforgivable, the number of victims is only one. Another humanitarian aspect of sentencing in Japan is how strongly remorse is valued. If, in court, Din Thi Huong breaks down in tears, shows repentance, and bows to apologize to the victim's family, along with factors such as personal hardship and being a first-time offender, the judge may take that into account to some extent. Conversely, if the defendant stubbornly denies guilt or coldly admits it, the likelihood of a harsher sentence becomes much higher. For now, all of this remains speculation. We will have to wait until the trial takes place to know exactly what sentence awaits Din Thi Huong. Either way, justice is on its way. One thing is certain: Huong will spend many years behind bars, paying for her crimes with the best years of her youth. In addition, if she is ever released after serving her sentence, it is highly likely she will be deported back to Vietnam immediately under a Japanese removal order. What do you think? What sentence is waiting for Din Thi Huong? And do you believe she was also the one who assaulted Nga back in May? Let Vietnamese Case Files know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found today's story compelling, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files so you can keep following more gripping stories in the future. Goodbye, and see you next time.